Yeah, man, sup my purples. My name is Bless Beats. Welcome to the Black Hole. Like, subscribe, smash that like button before you even know if there's something valuable in this video. I highly recommend that. On a more serious note, I've had a lot of requests about mixing on the machine for like the past 1 year. I just never felt like really making that video, but now I felt like making that video. So it's gonna be a big one. I would say this video is suited mostly primarily for noobs and beginners, but intermediate users, there's a thing or two you could definitely pick up in here as well, I think. Quite a large video that's going to take you pretty far with mixing only inside of a machine with stock effects. So, you're going to have to stay strapped in for a while and be patient in here because we're going through some essential stuff. And not only for, machine mixing, some good tips on mixing overall if you're making beats. So stay tuned for this. Keep those ears a razor sharp and listen. Okay, let us go. All right, first we're quickly going to run through how to add an effect. Just in case you need a reminder, you don't have to scroll back through all these other videos. All right, check them out. Step number 1, make sure we're on plugin. Step number 2, if you want to add an effect that affects all of the groups, be on master. If you want to add an effect that affects all of the sounds in one group, be on group. If you want to add an effect that only affects one sound specifically, be on the sound. Alright, I want to add an effect to this. Now first, either by using the jog wheel and skipping right until the very end, till I reach that plus there, and then press Shift and a browser. Now I can load up any effect I want. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to replace this. You can also use these arrows to skip back and forth between the effects. Now I don't want this effect anymore. How do I remove it? Hold Shift and press remove. I want to temporarily disable the saturator. How do I do it? I hold Shift and press bypass. Alright, that should be it. We are ready to go. Number 1, we have this measly drum break here. You can hear it sounds pretty damn puny right now, not exactly where we want it to be in our final masterpiece, you know what I'm saying? So, the first thing we're going to do is clean this up. This is an alternative. If you have a close listen here and listen to all the background noise that's there from the record, we might not want that. So the first thing we're going to have a stab at is the gate effect. Now, as we add the gate effect, I've already added it, but we can go through it once again. Hold Shift, press browser, scroll to the gate, load it. Make sure it's not bypassed. Now it should be on. What's going on here? Nothing. No sound is coming through. Because why? Because the volume is too low. The first thing we want to do here is check the threshold. Since the volume of the sample in this particular case is lower than minus 10 decibels, we need to pull this down until we start hearing something. Oh, there's a clap. Still not picking up the kick because it's at an even lower volume. There we go. And now you can hear we don't have that background noise anymore. Question of preference, you know what I'm saying? I like to keep it in there. But if you wanted to clean it up, you can use the gate effect to do that first and foremost before you proceed with other masterpiece procedures. There's an output mix here, so you can blend in if you just want a little bit of the noise. And you can also experiment with the attack, hold, and release. The release is pretty much from the time that the sound is coming through, how long is it going to take to fade out. And you can use the attack to sort of get some control and tame the transient. If it's hitting you too hard, you can actually use the attack of the gate to fix that. Alright, I'm happy with that. Let's go to the next process. It's still sounding very puny. So we're going to have a look at some thickening effects to make the sound more thicker. I'm scrolling through my effects here, which by the way are on the group because I want these effects to affect all of these chopped samples that I have on this group. Sometimes I'll split up the kick, the snare, the hi-hats, just for easier manageability, you know what I'm saying? So the first thing we're going to have a look at is the saturator. The compressor, transient master, limiter, maximizer, distortion, and saturator are all things we can use to fatten up our sound. We're not going to go through all of them, but for some basics magic, we're first going to have a look at the saturator. Saturator adds some harmonics to your sound, and you can sort of distort it without having the sound clip. So it's going to push it up in volume and make it sound a little bit thicker. There's 3 different modes: classic, tape, and tube. We're just going to go with the classic mode here. You can experiment as you wish. Already here at the default settings, it is sounding much better. We pushed it up in volume and we got some saturation in there. See, no saturator? Yes, saturator. We can even go one step further and add a transient master to our drum break. All of these little peaks here are called transients. And we can manipulate the shape and form of these by using the transient master. This is one that's going to have you easily swept away because it adds a lot of punch, top punch to your drums. So you don't want to abuse it, you want to use it subtly. Let's activate this effect. And see, this is pretty much at 0. As we push up the effect, it has a much harder hit to it, but it's also a little bit piercy. So I like to keep just a little bit of it. And you can shape the sound even further here by using the sustain. If you want to completely clean it up. After we have the gate on here, there was still some noise. Now we're pretty much just hearing the attack of the transient and not so much more. So if you want to get super clean, you can use the transient master and the sustain. Another one, if we go back and bypass these 2 effects, is the compressor. This one is a more obvious one. Same thing goes here with the threshold. Whenever it's a threshold, there's no way to say exactly what value you should set this to, because it all depends on how loud your sample is and what's going on in there. Since this one is very low, it should have probably been recorded with a higher gain or input level. It doesn't we know from using the gate before, it's not going to be affected unless we pull this down to the lower volume where there actually is sound to grab onto and start shaping and affecting. So what a compressor does, quickly, very briefly, evens out the peaks of the sound. So you see we have a mini peak right there. That's going to be closer to the bigger peak next to it. So if you have a lot of uneven volumes in your samples, you can sort it out with a compressor. So the first thing you want to look at is threshold. Now we can hear it really start working. And you can set the amount as pretty much, the amount of how much is going to be affected by the compressor. The knee controls the shape of the compression, and so does the time here. So the time, the attack and the release of the compressor, as soon as the sound hits the threshold, so okay, the compressor is hearing the sound. All right, now let's start compressing it. When do we do it? As soon as the attack time has passed. So the shorter the attack, the snappier and hittier the sound is going to be. And same thing for the release. After the compressor starts working and the sound goes below the actual threshold in volume, when do we let go of the compression? So for drums that are short and snappy, generally you want a pretty short attack and short release. Okay, so we have some decent sounding drums. Let's go back to the saturator and the transient master. Turn those back on. Try it without the compressor. Okay, so we're happy with that, but we're still not happy enough with the thump. There's not enough low end in there, so let's see what we can do with the EQ. The EQ effect is probably the most difficult to teach in theory because it's a lot about listening experience. By using an equalizer a lot on many different sounds and references, eventually you'll start to get a knack for where you find certain frequencies. But there's pretty much one very essential trick that you can do in your process of learning this, and that is sweeping. Sweeping is the god, you know what I'm saying? Especially when you don't have visual feedback like on here and you really have to use your ears. Sweeping is a great way of finding the frequencies that you want to affect. So we want to find some more thump in this. And where can it be? It's in the low end. You'll want to look around from maybe all the way down in 60 hertz up to around 120. That's where you find that deep end bottom of the kick sound. So let's see what happens if we sweep it around there. In order to do that, we're going to turn up the gain a lot because that's going to make it super clear this specific frequency that we're on and a little bit in the roundabouts of it. We're sweeping, and there's not a lot of low-end information there for us to pick and manipulate. We could make the highs crispier. Let's show an example of sweeping around there. Alright, so there we found some more clarity in the clap sound coming through. So maybe we want to emphasize that, but that doesn't mean we're going to keep it on 20 decibel. That is too loud. That's just for finding the frequency. Now that we found it, we can boost it just a little bit. So go back to 0. You can hear it's pretty dull right now. Rule of thumb says you should never boost more than 3 decibels, and generally you should cut more than you boost. I don't give a fuck about the rules of thumbs. We have a little bit of a more clearing sample, but we still have to do something about that kick because there's no thump in the kick of the drum break. You're probably familiar with that, but we have a kick right here. And I just use the quick low pass filter. So all that we keep is the low end of the kick, and then I dub that onto there. I also added some saturation and transient master to that one. Just a little bit, not to overkill. Alright, this next one is a big one for the noobs out there. Senders. Generally, any effect that adds ambience or echo, like the reverb or delay, grain delay. Generally, you don't want to add them as insert effects for various reasons. And adding them as an insert effect, that means pretty much you're adding them straight onto here. So if we wanted to add a reverb to the drums, I would add it there. Now I've added it as an insert effect, you must say. And then you just use the mix here to adjust how much of it you want. That's a no-no. You can't do it, but we'll get back to that in a second. So let's remove it, and what we actually want to do is create a send effect. And we want to send the sound signal from our original sound source over to this own little place where the reverb or the delay or whatever it may be lives. So let's make a home for a delay. And you can place this either on sound or group level. It doesn't really matter. Wherever you want it. I'm choosing an empty group here. and I'm going to the group level to add it straight onto there. If you would add it to a sound level, that we're placing it on the first slot here, where an instrument or a sampler instance or something like that could be, but the effect is going to be our main instance on this pad here then. If you're on group or master, it doesn't matter because you can't add samples or instruments onto there. But we're on a new group here, already named it delay. Hold shift, press browser, and let's add a beat delay. From default here, you don't even need to bother with the mix more than setting it to 100%, because this is going to be only the delay. You're going to hear only the delay on this group, just how it affects the sound, how the delay affects the sound, nothing of the original sound, right? So we set it to 100, and then we go back to the group we want to add it to. And this time, let's go for some hi-hats. So you can hear the hi-hats there. You can choose either if you want to send a sound or an entire group to a send effect. But we're going to send this whole group because it's from the same sample right there. I want this whole group to be sent to the delay. Now, how do we do that? We go to channel. And we're clueless here. Where the fuck do we go? We have to press the right arrow and find aux. This is where we're going to find our friend, the delay. And since we gave it its own home, we can find it here in the list if we scroll on knob number 1. There it is, clearly visible, delay. Let's try it. Still nothing. But what if we twist this? Oh, it's muted. Let's unmute it. See, the pro of this, especially if you're using a delay, is you can control when and how much of the original sound source is going to be affected by the delay. So we could automate this over time. Say you want it clean first, and then after a while, the delay fades in. Imagine all the types of cool shit you could do with that. And this is not only for the delay, you could do it with reverb effects or whatever you want. But generally, the effects that are considered send effects would be reverb and delay and things of that nature. And that also goes for grain delay, Metaverb, the ice, shimmenebre, you know what I'm saying? So let's go back to plugin. We changed our mind. We want this to be a reverb instead. Set it to 100. Now we need to make sure, go back to channel and make sure that we're on the right group. There we can hear the reverb. And another pro of this is we get easy access through the mixer. Now we have the reverb channel right here on the delay. It should say reverb. It says delay right now, but it should be reverb. Now you can turn the entire reverb down that way. And this essentially would be the same thing as you're twisting the mix knob, except now you have more control over it. In the mix. Let's break the rules though. We have a sample right here. Let's go to plugin and be on our merry way to the group where the sample resides. We could actually add one of these effects, and let's start off with the reverb. This is just for cool effects. Let's start off with 100% on the mix, just to hear exactly what we're doing. This can be very effective for placing it in the mix. You can hear as I'm changing the room size, it sort of affects the stereo image as well. So you can experiment with that. And you can also automate this over time. So if you change the size, and this goes for delays as well, if you change the size and you automate that, you get this pitch swing. which can be really cool. Maybe it's a bit too much right now, but if we blended it in, we can have some more life to it. And something else I like to use is the pre-delay. If we twist it back to 100, this is pretty much how long it takes before the effect kicks in. So you can add some cool slapback effects that way. Try experimenting with that on the Reverb, the Metaverb. Matter of fact, let me show you the Metaverb. It's one of my favorites, especially when it comes to placing it in the mix that is really effective. Or just to make some cool sounds, spicing up your samples. You can hear how the sample is moving around in the room. It's getting closer to you, moving a little further away, leaving some more space in the mix. Depending on what other sounds you have in your beat, you can use this to calibrate where it's at. And either keep it on 100% for a cool effect or just blend it in a little bit, but then you might as well just put it as a send effect like we showed just before. Another cool one is the grain delay. If we set the size to this to very small, 0%, pitch it up an entire octave, you can hear this tremolo going on, or going between left and right. I don't remember what it's called. You know, the tremolo between left and right. If we go to the right here and change the stereo output to 0, it's not flying around quite as much, and then you can start adjusting other things like the density. Get this almost time stretchy effect. Reverse it to make it sound extra cool. So the grain delay is very cool to use as an insert effect too. Breaking the laws, making it extra cool, you know what I'm saying? Spice it up. Final bonus effect. If your beat sounds like this, and you haven't really paid attention to getting all the levels right in the mix, pushing up the volume wise, you can always put a limiter on the master and get some instant gratification, quick master things. I hope you learned something here today. If you want to pick up even more stuff, if you're new to the Maschine, I highly recommend my course, Maschine Noobs Mastery Course. Link in the description below. If you're at square one, you are going to learn everything you need to know about the Maschine, and it's still a very valid course to this day. Join us in the Discord, The Black Hole. Lots of beautiful personalities in there. We do the weekly beat challenge. We support each other through thick and thin. Strong, you know what I'm saying? All right. Okay, bye-bye.